your insights are going to be definitely very interesting. But because we are still 2 minutes before 7:30, so let me just go through my slides, what I normally do in between.
Yes, yes, and
And
thank you for inviting me. So, hello.
thank you.
Saying hello to all the live people who are watching the live stream.
They're going to come live every day at 7:30. Okay, so basically, let's just go through April. So what do we have? We had Rosanna, wonderful conversation. So that, then this I just put out because on Diwali I had put out this message. So if there is light in the soul, there will be beauty in the person. If there's beauty in the person, there will be harmony in the house. If there's harmony in the
That's
house, there will be
beautiful.
order in the nation. If there is order in the nation, there will be peace in the world. It all starts with the soul. So the symposium, heart, soul, and spirituality. And of course, over the symposium, let's see how the discussions go. And then we'll have one session at the end to just discuss what all we went through. So this. So let's be the light the world needs and the soul part of it. So right now we have all these people.
Wow.
Michael might not be able to participate. Michael just sent an email today that he will not be able to participate because his wife has to go through certain procedures.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so that he won't. But otherwise, the people might get added as we go along, like we did last time.
Mhm.
Added people and went on adding people. So this is tomorrow, the keynote speech by Ken. It should have been the first, but he did not have time on the 7th. So that, and Saturday we have Anna from Ukraine and in conversation with beautiful mind. Like I said, she's had to
Good.
move
I
out.
can't wait to hear her.
Yeah, she had to move out and now she's in Spain. So also discussion as to how she's looking at things going forward. Then of course you're coming in for the discussion. So
Yes, creativity. This is the creativity.
yeah,
Yes,
yes, creative
creativity and
innovation.
innovation. Yes,
So
which we cannot
Francesca,
do without spirituality.
so Francesca, very interesting. Her music and mediation. That discussion of hers will be very interesting, of course. So, but Andrea and Constantia, Andrea will talk maybe more about innovation in terms of the online platforms that she has in Brazil. So innovation in whatever way. I mean, I'm not saying that it has to be only the creative in the creative of the arts. Could be anything, whatever. So this was the first episode, first session, first speaker, the 7th of April. Of course, all of them are on YouTube. Today we had Prerna, wonderful session of hers.
Yes, I really wanted to go to her session.
Please watch it. It's really nice.
I am going to watch it. Yes.
Elena, of course, it's always nice to have her. Yeah, Jody, very interesting conversation. It was more of a conversation. Lisa comes in. We're going to get to know her over some time, which I haven't been able to get to know her after over so many years. But let's see what today does to us. And then we have Kathy.
You don't know me yet.
I'm just about starting to. All I know is that you don't find Zoom links. That's what I've got to know today.
Oh, yes.
Okay, we'll go talk about that
too
later.
much of your time.
Okay, now let's. Okay, so then we have tomorrow at 12 p.m. Sarah. Then Gunavati, 1 p.m. Gabriela, 6 p.m. Federico, 7 p.m. and Ken, 9:30 p.m.
Wonderful.
Perfect. And then, of course, as as we progress, I'll put up the other speakers. So that's about one part of it. Then obviously the website, and on that website, you can find details about whatever I'm doing. The Mediation Vision 2026, I'm highlighting these days. I'm trying to tell people that have a look at those points. If there's anything that you want to discuss out of those, so please go to the website, mediatorvikram.com. And what else, Lisa? Is there anything that I have to tell people about? Oh, yes. Important thing which I've been telling people now is to stay in touch about what's happening, getting updated. On LinkedIn, you have the bell icon, like you have of course, on YouTube. So just press the bell icon and you can get all the notifications for the posts that I put out, or anyone puts out. I mean, not just for me. So I think that is important to stay updated. What do you think? Isn't that useful?
Yes.
So what does it look like? Let's just see. So that's the bell icon. You can see the bell icon. Of course you can. On the corner.
Yes, there it is. There's the
That is it.
bell.
Yeah, that's it.
Right over on the, well, on my
So just press that.
left-hand side, but perhaps you're right.
Yeah, then so you'll be notified about all the posts.
Hmm.
That's about it. So that's easy. Of course, you have the YouTube option. So let me just see what I'll do is, let me just tell you on YouTube, what I've done is, because I've already put out all the schedule for this week, for tomorrow also. So if you go to the YouTube channel and you press videos, so you'll get to know what is upcoming. So we tell you when it is scheduled, at what time. So you have all that happening. Of course, these are happening live night right now. So that's also one way of finding out what's happening, because I think this is more updated than maybe my website also. So that is it. Now from here onwards, you have to tell us about yourself and just take it from there, please.
So, I don't know what to tell about myself, but I've been a mediator since 1996. So I've been in this business for a long time. And I think it's a very passionate thing to me. So talk about spirituality, I think it's connected really with what I do and how I do it, because I think that, I was thinking about this, as Vikram said, oh, if you're going to come and talk. So then you start thinking about things a little bit more deeply. But for me, being in a mediation is you are in a spiritual space in a way, because you're in that place where when we have conflict, it's our emotions, and our emotions are part of our spiritual being. And we are in the middle of two people, and we are, I think, blessed in a way, but we are in a space that is very personal to them. And so here we are sitting in a room as mediators, listening to something that is very personal to the two people, or maybe more than two people, because I do a lot of multi-party, but it's a space that is very personal, and it's not a space that is often where you have the privilege to hear. You're getting to hear people's thoughts and feelings that they're expressing as a mediator. And so that is a gift that's given to us. And I think that we need to realize, it's important for us to realize as mediators, it's a humbling thing. We need to think of that as a humbling experience and as a gift, and make that space. So ask me questions, because I'm much better at conversations.
I wanted you to tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of work that you've done, a little, as much as you can, maybe a little bit about, because I know about you and you've been on Evolution of a Mediator, you've told us your story, but a lot of people might not, because what you're going to tell us about heart, soul, spirituality, and mediation is definitely connected to you as a person and what you've gone through. So in brief, if you want to talk about that, so at least we know where you're coming from.
Okay, so I started in community mediation, and I've told people this because I was studying because I had lived overseas, because I had had this breadth of experience living in different cultures. And my husband had just passed away. My first husband had just passed away. I wanted to go into the workplace and give back some of the gifts that I had given from being able to live in these places. And so I recognized in that process of learning that to do that, to really be a good person helping people bridge the divide culturally, I also needed conflict resolution skills. And guess what? There was a free mediation training. I love the word free. Vikram doesn't like the word training, so pretend I'm not saying that. But it was a free mediation, and all you had to do was agree to mediate at the Community Mediation Center for one Saturday a year. So I said yes, and I got hooked. I got absolutely hooked on the whole idea of mediation. I loved it. I started writing grants and developing programs, and so I've done not only community mediation, but I was able to do a lot of victim offender programs and civil mediations and the whole wide range connected with the Community Mediation Center. And I continue to do that. And right now I'm in the process of working with a group in Cincinnati to create a community mediation center there. And we're going to be creative about it. So that's a little bit about me. Actually, there's a whole lot because I keep doing stuff and they're different.
No, but these are important things. I'm telling you seriously, these are important because as you go along, and of course, when you tell us, there is something to that background, because that's obviously, which I've always put out, that all those things are important. That moment that you said you got hooked is because there was so much about you that you brought into that space. So that's what I'm trying to bring out as to what all did you have, or what all did you maybe go through, or your thought process on that in that moment when you got hooked. So that's also an important part, which, yeah, please.
Yeah, no, I mean, it spoke to me, but it did have a lot to do with my experiences and that bridging culture differences, because I had already learned a little bit about talking to people who were different than me. And that opens us up. I think that, you know, sometimes we walk around like closed systems and we don't see the other. We only just see what, like we're walking like horse, you know, with the two
Blinders.
what are the blinders? Yes, the blinders over their eyes, and we don't see anything to the side. And when you open things up, you can see a much wider view. We get out of that. And I think that's the advantage of living in different cultures, that you get to see, especially if you go deeply into the culture. Like visiting on the exterior is different, but I mean, my first experience was living in my husband's family, and that was a huge, deep cultural experience, because it wasn't just a touristy kind of thing. It was actually living within the group. And so I always sought those experiences. When I went to Indonesia, it took me 8 years to really become accepted in the Indonesian lifestyle and daily pattern. And so, you know, it also is a lot of work.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I'm just saying that why I was trying to get that through is because as you're going to take us, so you can always tell us how you look at yourself in terms of, because heart soul spirituality, connecting it to the mediator, the parties, the process, and anything more beyond that. It's totally yours, space, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, so I do feel that way, because I feel like our growth, I mean, our ability to recognize that we are not just individuals, we're all connected. And that that's the part of spirituality, that recognition. You know, sometimes when you are listening to someone in conflict, it also spurs within us that we know we've been there before. It might not be the exact same conflict we've been in, but it humanizes us in that way that we start to get connected. And we see those connections, because a lot of times we're walking around with, like I said, with blinders. We don't see each other. And we start to see one another when we start to open up. But we don't always open up with one another. We have a facade, we have a face, we have a, you know, how we want to present ourselves to the world is there, out there every day. But to really open up, to really let those things that are inside us out, that's a huge thing. And that's what happens in a mediation. People are, I mean, just by the nature of conflict, they're letting it out because they're frustrated, because it's built up inside, and they have to let it out in order to start to find a peace to that moment. But at the same time, you know, we as mediators, we are kind of witnesses to that unfolding. And that is like a huge thing, that now they're opening up, and then they start to see each other. And then we see the bonding or the reconnection. So the connection is lost. And then in this process of mediation, they find their way back to the connection. It's like really, really inspiring.
But what else do you want to highlight about yourself? Anything that you think in your, I mean, in terms of your understanding of the topic and heart, soul, spirituality part of it?
Yeah. So my understanding, of course, the way that I look at spirituality is spirituality to me has to do with that. It's that invisible part of us that touches our emotions, touches our identity, touches it, all our feelings. But it's bigger than that. I think that there's also, for me, spirituality is also what we see that connects us. So I kind of think of it as physics. So if you think of physics, this is how I think of it. And I think that, okay, so one of the things I know is that, okay, I have this mug here and it's just a mug. It just looks like something, it's solid, right? But if you know physics or chemistry, actually it's not solid. It's just all these molecules moving so fast that it feels like, it stops you because those molecules are moving fast. But the reality is there's all this space in between. And so for me, spirituality is all the space in between. It's all the what we don't see. This is what we see. What we don't see are all those spaces in between. And that runs through every single thing in the universe. So we're all connected. We just don't see it.
And how
So
do you bring,
for me, that's, pardon me?
and how do you bring that into as a mediator and the process? How do you bring that there?
I think as a mediator, it's important for me to recognize that this is a spiritual space. And also one of the tasks of the mediator is to create a space, which is invisible, but create an atmosphere that makes it easy for people to talk. And that creating a space in and of itself also is very spiritual, because we want to create an atmosphere where people feel comfortable coming in, where people feel comfortable to sit down, where people can feel comfortable to share this and to not be judged. Because judging stops us. We're afraid of being judged. We're like and the mediator's role is not to be judging at all. In that moment, we have let go of the process of deciding whether we like something or don't like it. In that moment, it's only about listening. And that too is also very spiritual. We have to set our minds to be in that space where we're not going to decide, oh, I don't like that. No reaction. To set your mind at that is a process and a mindset that has to be cultivated. It's not like it just happens. In the first part of learning, it's so awkward when you first go into a mediation and you're first doing it because you're not in that space yet. But as you practice and you get into that space, it becomes easier and easier. But it's about honing our mindset so that we aren't having any judgment. We are moving that aside and we're being in the moment. It becomes so zen for me, especially the transformative process, because that's more of giving the parties and honoring the parties, but making that space. So that's very zen, because if you're in the moment with people, then you're just in the moment. You're just observing. You're just, when you can come in and make an intervention, and when you should stay out. And it's like a dance. So there's this dance going on with the conversation, and we are like observing that very intently. It's very different. I'm very different in a mediation than I am in a conversation. Like, I feel like, when I go into a mediation, then I'm so in the moment. It has nothing to do with me. And I listen. I don't listen in normal conversations, but I'm not the best listener. I like to argue a little bit.
I haven't noticed that. When does that happen?
Doesn't happen in mediation. But it really is, it's so important because, you know, as you are listening to someone and making sure that you're in the moment, it's just really being listening, and listening also because it's so intense, because you want to make sure you listen to every word, so you're in the moment. You're making sure that you're observing the body language and the movements and everything. So you have to be very in the moment. And that in itself, I said, is extremely spiritual experience. It's like a meditation. You know, like a Zen meditation, where a walking meditation, for instance, where you notice every part of your walk and every muscle when you're walking, and you notice what it feels like in every step that you take. And that same thing, same way, that's how we mediate. We are noticing every little thing in the room when we're really in the moment. And I think when we reach that level where we're in the moment, we're better mediators. Because we also have to, I think Michael Lang has helped so much in this. I'm giving him a plug here. Sorry, Vikram, but Michael Lang, like when I first learned mediation way back in the 90s, Michael Lang came to talk to us about the process of reflective. And that reflective process, I think, increases the amount of the spiritualness, and that's in the momentness, because after mediation, that's another part of our mediation practice, really being able to be reflective, because that reflective process helps us to be more in the moment the next time, in the next mediation. It's everything is so connected. Everything is a huge system to me. And all these little steps that we learn, the way that we come in and we introduce a mediation, that sets up that space. And that in itself is also an art form. How do we set the space and the tone? Just like Vikram, you know, you're setting the space for these conversations in the way that you introduce and the way that you introduce each of the people. So it sets the tone. So that tone is an art form. How do you set the tone for the parties? How do you reflect to them also, you know, how much they can do and what decisions they can make, and letting them know, you know, how much of the decision making they can make is another part of that. So it's all related in every aspect that we do mediation. And it touches us in the sense that the way that we choose to do mediation, and I don't, you know, I mean, I know my preference is following this format, but I think that being in touch with what our beliefs are about other people is very important. We have to be intentional about our own motives and our own intentions and why we have those motives and intentions, because sometimes in a mediation, we can get frustrated and say, oh my goodness, they're taking forever and they keep going around in circles and I really want this to be over. But then I have to think, well, but that's my intention. That's what I want. That doesn't have to do with what they need or what they want in the moment. So again, that part of spirituality is shifting that from what I need and recognizing, okay, that's me. Go away, little voice in the head, and get back to the moment where it's kind of like when you're breathing in yoga and your mind wanders, then you have to bring yourself back to focusing on the breathing. The same thing happens in mediation. When your mind wanders and you start thinking about what you want, you have to bring yourself back to being in the moment. So in that way, that's also like, that's also a way of really being very intentional and spiritual about it.
Okay, so it means I should add to that heart, soul, spiritual, no, heart, soul, meditation, spirituality, and
I mean, the heart and the soul, like, how do we even separate? Like, the heart are the emotions, and the soul is like, what is that really? How do
That's
we?
exactly what you have to discuss.
Spirituality is all blended together, and the heart and the soul is what's happening in a mediation, because it's your heart and your soul. That's that's where, you know, mediation is tough. It's like, I mean, it's easy when two people have decided what they want, they figured it out, and that's great. And I get into mediations like that. That's wonderful, you know, but the mediations that are the most touching are the ones that involve the heart and the soul, where it is the emotions. And that's so often is in community mediation. You know, my feelings were hurt, or somebody was hurt, or maybe there was a criminal damaging and somebody, you know, punched in the destroyed the car window with a baseball bat, and because it was so emotional, and the parties come in, and then they find out, you know, what was it really behind that? Really behind that action was some pain or some hurt or something else. And then it wasn't just them being hurt, both parties were hurt. And when they are able to express that, and then you see that, okay, you know, you were beating it in with a baseball bat, but then you leave and you're like, okay, are we going to go to dinner, you know, next week? And it's, you know, it's over and the waters are calm. That's huge experience for us as mediators when we observe that and we see that. And I think you also get this knowledge in mediation that relates to our own spirituality, that, you know, that it's not that simple. Like, victims are often actually the offender, and offenders are actually often the victims, and there's no strict line between them. And so you get a wisdom about people that you didn't have before. I think that's also another gift. So that's it. Heart, soul, and spirituality, but they're all the same thing.
No, I think that's what you have to take us through. What is your understanding of heart, soul, spirituality, and then in relation to mediators, the parties, and the process? Please take us through that.
Yeah, so my understanding of heart, soul, and spirituality. So again, my understanding of spirituality, to me, spirituality is that, like I said, that space in between. So almost anything that involves that empty space, and it's sometimes, to me, very huge. And I feel like, you know, we all are connected in so many ways that we don't know or we don't see. And that whole idea of spirituality is something very big and something that we all have. It's not a religion, because it goes through all religions. It goes through all belief systems. But at some point, last night, I was having a very interesting conversation with a city, not a city, actually, county official, someone very well-known in the county, and elected official. And she was saying, you know, most of the time she deals with politics. That's it. It's everything is politics. And then for her, she's always getting disturbed because of politics. She also gets so many complaints and nastiness and people saying things that are really difficult. And it's been hard for her not to judge or blame the other person. And then recently, she's been going through nonviolent communication course offered by the Rotary Club here. And she said, for the first time, even though she intellectually, she knew all these concepts about not blaming the person, not, you know, looking at the action and separating that from the person, all of a sudden she had like an epiphany that, wow, okay, now I get it. You know, now I get what they're talking about. And then she was talking about spirituality, that it really opened up for her the spirituality of this whole idea of conflict, that when you go there, that you find out that you have more in common with people than you have differences. So we had a long conversation yesterday about that. And I think for me, that's exactly what spirituality means. It's about seeing that connection that we have with everyone. And even when there are some actions that we don't like, it doesn't mean that the underlying fundamentals aren't different. And sometimes we can't, I feel like conflict is not something that is, we always talk about conflict, about it's a terrible thing, but conflict is necessary. We can't go forward without conflict. We can't, in fact, having conflict, like if you have no conflict in your life, you may not be as deep a thinker. I'm not saying that that's true, but you may not be as deep a thinker. You may not be, as you may not be as enlightened. I think when I was studying, I remember I wrote a paper. I was studying my master's degree in intercultural communication, and I wrote a paper about the experience of war. And I studied the people who had come out of conflict, particularly at that time, the Vietnam War, and what they took away from that. And it's like that experience of this deep, deep conflict actually gave some of them a very spiritual aspect. It's why Native Americans value they value the person who fights for them. They value the fighters and the warriors. So, and that reason is because they come with them, they come back with a knowledge, and a special knowledge that many of us don't have. And if you look at even the tantric yoga, there's a whole process in tantric yoga that takes you to this place where you do things that you wouldn't do, that challenges that, because sometimes we have to challenge the way that we see things in order to actually see them. I mean, I'm putting it in simplistic terms, I think, to try to explain it, but I think, so for me, these are there, and the privilege that I get is to be, I used to do a lot of work with Vietnam veterans, and the privilege I got was to learn from them. And I remember, sitting with someone who had been back and hearing his story about the war, and then talking to me, and I recognized, he talked about breaking a neck, and it was like, I don't have that experience of that death and that dying. I have experience of watching someone die, but I don't have the experience. And those are all very spiritual experiences, because they touch us from that inner core. We all are going to be there someday, but what do we learn from that? What do we take away? And I work with people who have been incarcerated, and they come out, and many of them have done this deep reflection of themselves, and they are so spiritual. I mean, I cannot tell you how much I learn from these stories, because they've examined themselves, they found those things that they did wrong, and they were able to turn it around. And to me, that is the essence of spirituality, when we are able to touch ourselves in a deep level and then take that forward to becoming better human beings and better people in the world. And so for me, that's what spirituality is. That's what the heart and the soul is, because they're able to see their soul. They're able to cleanse their soul, take that, deep pain and use it to transform themselves. And then, as a person who's learned how to do a little bit of listening and not judging, I get this privilege of being there for a moment, having a glimpse into like a peek into a reality that I wouldn't have otherwise.
But in terms of the soul, what is your understanding of the soul?
My understanding of the soul is, for me, the soul is that deep, that in a way it's who we are. And I'm not talking about, I don't want to say the word identity, because our identity is not that, it's part of the soul. It arises from the soul, but that's also includes how we want to be seen. But the soul itself is that essence that we're born with, that drives everything we do. And sometimes we know, like, our soul is being touched when um, definitely when we procrastinate. Okay, maybe our soul is not getting the food from this activity, and when we can recognize that, so that we have this soul, and sometimes we don't see it, we don't recognize it, or we don't acknowledge it, but it is that part that drives us and gets us. And you know it, like, oh, people are around you. You know it when you have kids. A kid is born. I mean, every child of mine was totally different. Why? Because their soul was different. You know, they came out with a whole personality already. And that's what the soul is. That's that force that drives us. It's part of the unseen. It's part of everything. But again, we don't recognize it because it is part of everything. It's not like, I think we make the mistake of thinking that our soul is individually us, but the soul is actually the connecting part that connects us to everything else. That's what I think.
And how do you connect it to mediation?
Because in mediation, that is the part, because when we're in conflict, in my mind, it is because that's part of our soul is it's feeling hurt and it's feeling pain, or especially for negative conflict, you know, it's feeling that sense of, okay, I'm not connected. I want to be connected, but this thing is keeping me from being connected. And in mediation, we can open that back up so the connections can reoccur. So it's like in conflict, the same thing happened when my husband died. For years, I had like a invisible shield over my heart, you know, that people didn't see. And you have that because, you know, because the pain is so deep, and to touch that pain is hard. And when people are in conflict, it's the same thing. There's this pain, and sometimes they put a shield over it. And part of the process of mediation helps sort of open up that shield, so it doesn't have to stop you from being connected. If we're not connected because we're being protective and we're putting up our barriers, but the mediator can help remove those barriers so that, you know, your soul can shine.
But tell me, because you have been part of Indian culture, has that changed the way you look at these elements?
I think India was a huge influence on my life, really. I think that it changed many ways. Of course, I was raised, you know, in a Episcopalian church, Christian church. I'm saying Episcopalian because some more conservative denominations don't call that Christian. I'm not into that, but anyway, when I had one way, I had the view of love, and for me, that was the most important thing that I learned, you know, that loving and non-judgment, because that also from growing up, I had this necklace given to me, and it was a saying of Abraham Lincoln, and he said, you know, that if you look for the bad in others, you'll be sure to find it. It's like, yes, if we're going to judge people, we can definitely find all kinds of terrible things. But the real goal is to not look at the bad things, but to look at all the things we have in common. So I already had that. But then I went to India, and my father-in-law and the spirituality that he had every day, my father-in-law would go every day, and he would sit out on the porch. He got up very early in the morning to take a walk at 5 o'clock, 4 or 5, some hour that I was sleeping. And then he would sit on the porch and he would just take his beads and he would say prayers daily and talk to me. And I remember the first time I went to India, and there was this person coming around with sort of begging for food. And I was like, oh, look at this, using religion to beg for food. To me, that was like a no. And my father-in-law said, how does it matter, beta? You're like, how does that matter? Whatever level someone is at, that's all that matters. At least they're at some level. And I thought, wow, I love that way of thinking. That was a huge moment for me. Like, okay, ever since, like, that's what I should worry about. I shouldn't worry about anything else. It's what do they have to bring? It's not what level are you.
But in terms of discussions in relation to heart, soul, spirituality and their connection with mediation, and if you look at, because you've been part of the mediation world in the US, are these aspects discussed? Are they part of what, maybe, I don't know, let's not use the word training. I'm not using training. Okay. I'm using skill development. I'm using skill development, but you understand what I'm talking about.
I do. And you know what? It's really fun because I just to help you or to support you, I go out and I say, I have a friend, or colleague, mediator Vikram. He hates the word training. And then other people go, I hate that word too, for the same reasons.
Wow.
You have a lot of support.
Good. So I'm on the right track in terms of telling people. It's just that the acceptability because of whatever, because that's a word that's been used a little too much.
It's something that was used, but it is more of skill development and workshops, and that is a more appropriate term. So, but I think that if I hadn't been in India, I would not have been as good a mediator, or if I hadn't been even in Indonesia, and if I hadn't been a student of in Indonesia, we had a whole long workshop series on all the different religions. And it was an incredible, really long series of really learning the spirituality of all different denominations. And then I used to work with the Chinmayanan mission. I've always had a preference for Zen, more of a Zen kind of thinking, but even within Hinduism itself, because I believe that I guess I see where the nothingness and the something is all the same. So, but we do discuss it. Like even in the US, my first spiritual experience was the stupidest thing ever, with people sitting around saying something is nothing, but nothing is not something. I don't know. We were not smoking pot, I promise.
There's another part. Let me extend that. Say this: something is better than nothing, and nothing is better than God. So nothing is better than God. So that's kind of
but there are right now I'm involved with a woman named, stop that, sorry, that phone is on my with a woman named Virginia Swain, and we are doing a workshop, and it's an imaging workshop. And it is, the whole idea of the workshop is to get people from different ways of life and political views to start coming together and seeing what their vision is of being together and working together. And so in this visioning process, we use a visual, we have people create a visual image of what they think a good future would be, and then put it together. And the workshop is so, it's very spiritual. And I've had people who have been government officials who acknowledge the spiritual aspect of this workshop. And I'm finding more and more that a lot of times, because it's not part of our culture to talk about our spirituality, it's in the US, it's more of something separate, but more and more people are starting to talk about spirituality. It's definitely a talk that we've often had in mediation. We will even say, you know, many people will call it Zen-like, you know, our process. So I'm used to having those conversations with other mediators who've been around for a while. And that process, new mediators, it takes them a while to get to that, but more experienced mediators. I think those are common conversations. I think there's a very, very real recognition. And it also comes out from what spiritual tradition you were in. So, you know, I have Baha'i friends, and for them, you know, everything relates to the Baha'i method. I have Christian friends, and for them, they see it, you know, as very spiritual from a Christian point of view. But they recognize the spirituality, and they recognize that we all have that in common. It's kind of like Vivekananda when he came to the US and he talked about spirituality. He, you know, he was welcomed, he was embraced, because everyone recognized that what he was talking about is something that's common thread for them as well. And so, hi, Kathy.
Hi, Kathy. But I tell you, this one thing that I don't know if you remember that first episode of Mediators, Mediation and Spirituality, and I asked everyone, no one connected spirituality to religion.
There we go. Okay.
It's, of course, you're getting in a little later, Kathy.
I know.
You're early, which is.
I know. I came early as a.
Lisa,
yes.
Kathy's got a new master's degree. Yesterday, she got a master's degree in time zones. She actually calculated the time right. Otherwise, she's never got the time right. She's got the date wrong also.
Yes. And because I got the time zone right, I've now been accepted into the PhD program. So actually for real.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Now, what is this PhD? What PhD is it going to be?
It's going to be, pile higher and deeper, exactly. It's in the Communication and Culture program. It's a joint program between University X, formerly Ryerson, and York University in Toronto. And it'll be in politics and policy with a focus on the creative, of course.
Of course. Yay, Kathy. I'm so happy to see you. And by the way, we have to get together.
I know, me too. We do. We do.
No, but what we're going to do is we're going to get Kathy in a little later. Or I don't know. I mean, it can be a joint session also.
Stay here.
No, obviously she's staying here. But I'm just saying that it could have been a joint session, but I think we'll have to break it because of that whole live thing, because they've gone out as separate sessions.
Of course.
But the thing is
but
I'll
come later.
No, you're here. You don't have to come in later. You can stay. You can stay. I'll just put you on mute. Okay. So that was.
So I'm going to go back. You were saying when we did the spirituality, nobody connected it to, and I didn't hear the end part. I'm sorry.
To religion. No one connected to religion. I don't know if you remember. I don't know. We were.
I think it's beyond religion. Religion is what we believe and what we practice. But spirituality is what we feel, and it's our emotions, and it's that invisible self. That's how I would separate it.
So now, basically, of course, you've spoken about your understanding of the soul, spirituality, heart. Is there anything that you want to add on the heart?
I mean, heart is like so the heart is the emotions, that soul is that part that connects us to everything else. And spirituality is that whole process. It's like to me, spirituality is more of a, okay, so for Kathy, since she's here, it's more of the system. A systems design. Spirituality is the overall system. And then you have the little parts that are in there that make it all up. And so the heart and soul is that.
So any way you want to now connect it to the parties? Because of course, from the mediator's perspective, you think it's important, these elements.
It's important to recognize that when we're in that sphere with the parties. So the parties are there. The parties are in that space. Like I said, you know, it's touching them. It's their heart and their soul have been touched, and they're not connecting. So their spiritual self is challenged. And we create that space so they can have the conversation, so that they can move beyond that impasse where they're up against each other when they should be with each other. So it's about taking them away from this and moving them to this blend. And then, you know, that's that point, and helping them move there. So we're creating that space so that it can happen. Like, we're not doing anything else, just creating a space so it can happen.
Because there is a discussion that I was having with Jody earlier today about energy, about a certain energy concept. So is there something that you have thought about in terms of this energy concept?
I don't really use energy. I know a lot of people do, but for me, I think the spiritual aspect is that, like I said, it's that invisible connection, that invisibility that goes through all of us, that makes us all connected. And, you know, we know we're connected. You walk into a room, you can feel, you know, the people, you can feel what they're feeling. And a lot of people call that energy. I don't call that energy. To me, that is just that essence of who someone is. And I know, like I had talked about it, like I think the Koreans use it really well. Like, reading a room is also part of that. But we do it as mediators. We're reading the room. We're reading that, not just what we see. We're seeing nonverbal body language, but we're also get a feeling of what's being said. You're not just it's in the practical material aspects, which is how a person looks, how they sit, how they're doing it, what their tone of voice is. All of that is giving us messages, but there's other things underneath it that sometimes you can feel. So like sometimes I think that is also a skill, that if we can see that, because sometimes something is said, it's not said in a way that imparts a truth about what's happening, but you can read that that's an issue. So sometimes, because issues are sensitive. So let's say, for instance, I did a mediation where a woman was, a young girl was called a gorilla, and she's African American, and that's a huge insult. But it was discussed on the table as if it was nothing. The language is a nothing. So if you let that, it would be easy to let that one tiny mention, it was mentioned in a very small way. If you let that go, then that whole area that's really touching something deep inside would be let go. But if you put it on the table and you hold it up, it can be addressed, and the parties can say, oh yeah, okay, you know, now there's something we can talk about. And now they can come to some agreement, you know, so the role of the mediator in that is to find those things that are touching that, it could be the soul or whatever, but that are deep and painful things, and make sure that they're not just swept under the table. Because I don't want people to leave my room or my mediation with still something stuck. You know, I want them to leave feeling like, yes, I was able to address all the things that needed to be addressed. So for me, this is very important.
But is there a concept of connecting souls?
I don't try to connect souls. I think I think that's for what would be the right term. for that. That's for, like, you know, people who are setting people up. Yesterday, so we'll leave that to the matchmakers. I'm not a matchmaker.
But only now
What I want, and I'm going to say something also, because I do not enter into a mediation with the blind feeling that I'm going to get these two souls to go together and be happy forever after. They may decide they want nothing to do with one another, but they may feel that their spirit and their soul is free, you know. But so it's not about matching them together. It's about freeing them to be to be on their path, whatever that path is, and whatever level their path is.
Okay, but that's your view. We will definitely
that's my
discuss
view.
this aspect.
Other
Yeah,
people
we'll
have a
discuss this
different
aspect.
view, but that's my view.
So
And like
basically
I
now,
said, I'm not a matchmaker. I'm not going to be a matchmaker. You know, I'm not going to take your qualifications and match you up.
okay, so now you
And I'm not
basically
going to insist in a mediation that you have to get along. If you
okay, so you just have
apologize
to
and you
got
agree
got
to
it.
not talk to each other, that's wonderful.
No, got it, perfect. So you'll have to because you'll have to conclude in about a minute because I'll have to
Oh,
connect.
okay.
Yeah, please.
Well, I don't know. What do I conclude? I think I said everything. Hey.
Perfect. Great. Perfect. So thank you, Lisa. Thanks a lot. And always interesting talking to you. And at this point of time, I will cut the recording and the live stream.